Hello and welcome to Pickles Garage. Today we're working on my 2002 Jeep Grand Cherokee, specifically on the steering box, and I'll show you why here in a moment. Now my issue is I have a little bit of slack in my steering box, and so there's either a gap in the teeth or a bad connection somewhere, but basically I have that much slop in my steering wheel and the rim stays perfectly still. Now what this causes is because there's that much of a gap, if you hit a bump at low speeds, your wheels will start to vibrate back and forth and you're not really going to be able to correct it with the steering wheel. So normally if you slow down or speed up or something, then it'll resolve itself, but you end up with a pretty bad vibration. And so obviously not safe. It's called a death wobble for a reason. So we're going to go ahead and correct that by changing out the steering box. Now you'll also be able to see once I expose the steering box what it looks like at that angle. So first things first, we need to get to our steering box. If you have an aftermarket K&N, it's really easy. We're just going to take a screwdriver, undo that screw, and then that will lift up this piece right here. We can disconnect the hose either end, and then it's just going to be a couple bolts right there. If you have the stock steering box, it's very similar. Still going to be a screw there, still going to be a hose there. It's just going to be a little bit different on your connection points. So let's go ahead and get this removed and remove this wall, and that will expose our steering box right down there. All right, and if you've never done this before, it's just 7/16, and then it's sandwiched so there's a nut on the other side. And then you'll also notice that I did a rag and a bag to make sure that nothing falls down into my engine there. So I'll go ahead and get this off and we'll move on to the next step. So like I said, remove that, remove this. If you have a similar setup, and that exposes our steering box here, goes straight down. Now that play I was talking about, so here is that shaft, right? And then you'll see the pitman arm down there. That is what is actually moving your wheels, right? So everything is just a relay down to that, and then it moves. So then if I am going like this and moving it, right, and that's not moving at all, then that is play within our system. And so this should be nice and tight. I should not be able to rotate this around like this and it not interact with the pitman arm at all. So that is slop within our gearing, so we're going to go ahead and get this replaced. So let me show you what I bought. This is what I got, Edelman off Rock Auto for $450.79. It was the only one that was advertised as an upgrade to the stock specifications. Normally it's either going to be a remanufactured one from an old core or just a new one, but it's basically two stock specs, whereas this one is an upgraded for seals, gearing, and everything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and order this one. And here's our new part. So it's always good to kind of look at it prior to removing your old one, just because it helps you locate different bolts you're going to have to address, different parts that are going to be on this new one that you have to remove for your old one, or what you need to keep from your old one, etc. And then you can also run through the instructions, but I'll give you the details during the installation on this one as well. Now, one of the most important parts of this process is to make sure that this is centered when you're installing it, along with making sure that your wheels and your steering wheel and everything are centered as well. I'll go over some tips on that once we get started, but first we're going to go ahead and focus on the removal here. Now, there's a few different things to address. Naturally, you're going to need to remove this coupler. So we'll undo this bolt here, and then this is just going to kind of sit on this housing until we're ready to pull it out. You'll also notice that there's some higher pressure hoses here, and these are going to need to be removed as well. So naturally there's going to be some liquid, so just make sure you have a bucket handy. Realistically, you are supposed to flush the system entirely whenever you're doing this repair. That will just ensure a longer life for your new component, just in case there's debris floating around in the system. I'll show you what I do. Like I said, you can do it a lot more detailed than I do, but essentially I'm just going to let it all drain out and I'm going to replace it with clean fluid. But we'll get to those as well. There's also going to be the pitman arm we need to disconnect as well down there, as well as some mounting bolts for the steering box itself. But personally, I'm going to go ahead and start essentially from the bottom and do disconnecting the pitman arm. I'll disconnect this coupler, and then we'll get to the next steps. Under the vehicle, you'll see this is the nut that we're going to go ahead and get removed. I have some penetrant on it right now. You'll notice it is quite large, and so that size is either 1 5/16 or 33 millimeter. You can get these at AutoZone, basically any auto parts store. I did the impact socket, which is naturally more expensive just because I want to hit it with the impact instead. You'll get a little bit more sort of centered torque rather than if you're trying to pull on it, you might get a little bit of movement. So it's going to be a little easier with an impact. So let's go ahead and knock this off right now. And if you're struggling to get it off, you can always use a breaker bar and then just put it on the breaker bar and then use a jack handle and put that on the end of your breaker bar and then go ahead and pull it. I wouldn't do that with any sort of chrome socket, but impact should be strong enough to go ahead and do that. But you just need to break it loose and then it should come off. But just in case you have years of rust and you have time to heat treat it or do any penetrant. But now that it's off, we're going to go ahead and get the pitman dropped off of it. Now, I hate to use too many specialty tools, but I just tried to get the pitman arm with this crowbar and it is stuck. The bolt was the nut rather, was very stuck initially, so I was kind of concerned that everything would be sealed pretty tight, and it definitely is. So, I am going to be using a puller. Now, again, I don't like to use a lot of specialty tools in my videos, but these you can rent at most auto parts stores, and they are an absolute lifesaver. So let me set it up and show you how it works. Okay, so here's the setup. The best ones have the option to do 3 of these kind of hooks or 2. And so now I have it straight across from each other just to kind of have a pinch like this. And then as this threads inward, it's going to push that direction and pull our pitman arm off. So it should do all the work for me. I'm going to probably alternate between a breaker bar and a ratchet just because I don't want to break my ratchet. But we'll see how tightly on there it is. So we're just going to go ahead and start tightening this up. Actually, I am going the wrong direction. Embarrassing. There we go. See as it starts to kind of settle in there. And then typically there's a loud, distinctive pop, and then it gets real loose on you. So it's not too hard on the ratchet, so I'm going to keep it with the ratchet for now. It seems to be getting a little looser, so I think it's pulling. Oh, might not be getting our satisfying pop. Let's do that. Oh, there it is. There we go. So I'm just going to walk it the rest of the way. So now we're going to go ahead and remove this bolt. It's basically just clamshelling on top of a nub here, and so it's going to be the size half. So we'll just undo that. And then we'll probably have to wait until we're pulling this all out before it slides back, but we do want to make sure we get it loosened so that way when we get to that point it just slides on its own. But let's go ahead and get that removed right now. Alright, so now we are going to go ahead and get our hoses disconnected. So bolt is removed here. We have the pitman arm disconnected below. There's still the 4 bolts that are actually holding the body of this up, but I really don't want to remove those and then risk this dropping with these hoses attached. So we're going to go ahead and get them disconnected right here as they connect to the steering box themselves. We're going to use a wrench such as this. It's better to get one that has the connection to the 1, 2, 3, 4 sides, right? Rather than just having a 1-2 point, just like a standard wrench, because a lot of these will gall up a little bit and they'll start to flex because they're a little bit weaker, whereas this connects a few more sides, get a better grip on it, and then it should work better. So this is size 18, and we're just going to disconnect these. As soon as these disconnect, there should be some fluid that comes down. I'm going to zip tie them above the actual height of the power steering reservoir. That way it won't continue to leak. But I am going to go ahead and have a bucket down here just to catch any of the excess. Naturally, we're going to want to flush the system anyways, and again, I'll show you that a little bit later. Alright, so now we can go back under the vehicle. Now this is the driver's side tire right next to me. And you'll notice my plastic paneling here is all ripped up and missing. So you'll have to remove yours. It's pretty easy. There's just these black plugs right here, and they're going to be in different locations around holding the panel in place. You just have to pop those out with like a screwdriver, or if you can get something that's kind of like a forked prong like that, and you just slide it between and pop it that way just to get this out of the way. But like I said, mine's already missing, so I don't need to do that step. But I am going to need to address this windshield wiper fluid reservoir here. Now the reason we have to work on removing this is because these are our bolts for the steering box. So you can see two right here, 1, 2, 3, and then there's another one that would be equidistant over there, and it's being blocked by a reservoir here. So it should be pretty easy to remove. There are some plugs. I'm gonna see what I could do about leaving them. No, I'm just gonna unplug them. So I'll show you how to unplug each of these. There's 2 screws right here that you can see easily, and then there's another one at the top. I'm gonna start on the top one right now. I'll remove that. I'll remove these plugs, remove those, and then this should be able to get out of our way. So back in the engine bay, right there, 3/8 right there at the neck. Go ahead and get that removed. Okay, back under by the driver's side. I'm actually going to try and leave these because these are super old and brittle plastic. I would recommend, if you're going to do it, to try and get these removed. If you want, 1, 2, 3, 4, just to give you a little bit more leash. But like I said, I'm going to try and avoid doing it, but I still need to get it out of the way. So we're still going to go after those 2 bolts right there. Still 3/8. Let's go ahead and get those removed. Alright, so unfortunately the reservoir here is not able to fully clear this bar here, and what this is the front sway bar. Just goes all the way across down the front here. And so it is connected to a tie rod up there, but I believe you'll be able to swing freely once it's disconnected from the mounts here. And so I'm just going to go ahead and remove this plastic shroud, the fan, just drop it down a little bit. It's only connected with these plastic plugs here. So we're just going to go ahead and get those removed, which I'll show you here in a moment. And then it's going to be just a couple of bolts here. And naturally, we're going to have to do both sides. It's just going to be mirrored on the other side over there. That way we can get this dropped out of the way. So you should only have to do one, and it's very likely that it's going to break like this. It's open on the other side, so I'm probably just going to punch it through. You can buy these pretty easily online. Not a big deal if it breaks. It's just, unfortunately, just another thing you have to replace. But you should only have to do the front one, because then this is flexible enough to bend out of the way. And then this is going to be 18 millimeter. We'll do this one, and then naturally the one right behind it and then we'll go ahead and move to the other side. Once again, removing the front, boom, boom, and we should be able to get this sway bar out of the way. Okay, so now we have both out on each side. The front ones are actually really easy for the most part. It's pretty much a straight shot, even once you get the plastic out of the way, to just kind of break them loose. I just used a series of extensions just to get it under this level, and then I was able to use a jack handle to get the extra torque with the breaker bar, and then once they were loose enough, I used my Ryobi impact just because it's a little on the weaker side. The rear ones were a little bit more extreme. I basically separated my jack handle so it was a little bit shorter, and then I was able to fit it under here with a breaker bar. I don't think I had any extensions on it just because it was a deep socket, and I was able to pull it, and then once I got enough of it broken loose, then I was able to finish it off with a ratchet. But naturally there's a bunch of bars and stuff flopping around. This, for the most part, holds in place just because, like I mentioned earlier, it has the tie rods still connected to it. So I just kind of set it back, and that gave me enough room to take my reservoir and push it to the side. None of the wires are bound up or anything. It's just resting against the tire. And now I have access, plenty of daylight for my 4 bolts. So let me get you the sizes for that. We'll start removing those, and then we'll get the old steering box out and the new one in. Now these are very long bolts, lots of thread. Yours, if it's like mine, will have some sort of thread lock on it, which unfortunately makes it pretty tough for the first few turns, but eventually you'll be able to get it out with your fingers. But size 18, just like the other bolt we worked on. Long ratchet, if you have it, makes it a little bit more convenient just because it is going to be pretty stiff for a majority of these threads. If you have one of those ratcheting kind of impact ones, that's probably going to be great. I genuinely considered buying it after the first 20 or so turns of this thing, but you will get there. So we're going to keep knocking them out. There's 4 of them I had showed you earlier, so this is 1. Let's get the rest. Also, you shouldn't have to sort of worry about it dropping. It's resting on this frame here, so once these bolts are out, it shouldn't drop too hard. But naturally, you know, you don't want to be shaking it around too much or sitting directly under it just in case it does fall, but you shouldn't have that issue. And then specifically for these front 2, you should be able to get a little bit of added room here and go through the fender well. You can see one of the holes there, right there. So you can basically just get a series of extensions, get to your breaker bar, add a cheater, and that'll give you some leverage, at least for the first 2. You just have to kind of move that reservoir around. You might be able to get to the other 2 if you get like an angle on it. Naturally, the easiest thing would just be to remove this reservoir, but like I said, my plastic is all extremely brittle. Yours might be the same way. I feel like if I get those plugs off, I'm gonna have to replace them. So I really only struggled with the front 2, and so being able to go through here with my extensions is a lifesaver. So let me get this wrapped up, and then we'll get it removed. Go. So we have the old one out. I'm going to take the opportunity to just clean the area just to make it a little easier for the install. And then you saw I basically just kind of pushed this away with my thumb. And if for whatever reason you're struggling to get a good angle on it, because as you can see, this gives you quite a bit of flexibility, but you can always unlock your steering wheel by just putting your key in the ignition and not turning it on, obviously, but just unlocking the steering wheel, and that will help you kind of maneuver in case you need to get some adjustment. But you should be having your steering wheel completely in the straight position, so when you install it with the instructions I'm going to give you, everything is lined up properly. But right now this is in the straight position. I'm going to clean this up, clean this area, and then we will throw our new one in. So we have our new one pulled out. Now this is arguably the most important step in this entire process, and that is making sure that you are installing it with it centered. So you don't want to have it full lock to one side and then all of a sudden you can't turn your wheel properly. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Now we're going to go ahead and find ourselves a flat surface like this table, and we're going to remove this really gross plastic cap that is protecting some of this grease here, and we are going to get a wrench, and basically we're going to turn full lock to one side, and then we are going to count as we turn full lock to the opposite side, and then we'll go right there in the middle. So let me show you that with a tripod. Alright, so you can't really see it, but from my vantage point, this tool is basically right in between these two blue caps here, right? This is full lock counterclockwise position. So that is my starting point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and rotate this tool around. So that's 1, 2. Now it's stopped right here. That's full lock in the clockwise position. So now basically I need to find the halfway point between that and this, right? Because that's my starting point. So what is the halfway point between those two? I would estimate it to be right around there, right? So now that I've done my halfway point for the kind of the less than 1 number, then I'm going to do, because there was 2, 1 rotation around. So that should be my halfway point. Now you can test it, because again, this is where my beginning point is. I can go ahead and put an indicator here for where it is, right? So roughly that. So I could do 1 rotation, 1, and then that many clicks, okay? So did that feel good? 1 rotation. So now we're right back to the starting point. So let's do the opposite direction, 1 rotation, and then we'll see how many clicks, right? So if I feel comfortable with that, 1 rotation, right? 1 rotation around again, go from here to here, I would say that is my halfway point, right? 1 rotation around, and then bring it to here, okay? Right back to the center point, 1 rotation, we're back in the center. So that's how you can kind of test to make sure that you're close, but you should be accurate with that information. Do it as many times as you need to feel comfortable and just kind of verify that you are where you need to be. Because like I said, I can once again verify that I'm where I need to be. 1 rotation, click, down, 1 rotation, back to center. So now we can go ahead and install this. So we are in place. As you saw while I was installing it, I went ahead and slid this yoke on. What you noticed is I didn't really have to change too much. It slid pretty easily. So this can kind of help guide you if you're a couple degrees off. As long as your steering wheel up there is verified that it is straight, that will line up perfectly. If you're finding yourself having to turn the wheel a whole lot, or it's just, maybe it's up and down whereas it should be side to side, then go ahead and pull the whole thing out and verify your work, just because it should be pretty much lined up as long as your steering wheel is straight. That's why when you're installing this, straight steering wheel, straight wheels, and that helps line everything up. So I'm not going to put the bolt in just yet, just because I want to still have movement here while I locate the bolts down below. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I can get 1 or 2 of these in, and then I'll come back up and go ahead and install that bolt. So let's line these up. 18mm on these. They should go in a lot easier than the old ones. So I'm going to get a last bit of torque on them, probably with the breaker bar. You definitely don't want these to be loose. You don't want your steering box rattling around. So you want to try and get it similarly tight to what you took it off with, right? Like that same energy should be similar to putting it on. So we're going to finish up those here in a minute, and then we are going to go ahead and get this one added, which is the 13mm that right there. We'll get that nice and tight. Make sure it's kind of snug up against your new steering box, and then we'll get these plugged in. I'll show you which goes where. Then don't forget to replace your reservoir here. So it is size 10 for those, and it just goes in a slot right there. And then there's another size 10 up by the neck. And then just double check all of your connections and all the hoses to make sure that nothing's slipped out of place. And then again, if you have your inner fender well here, you'll just have to replace those hop rivets. And then we'll move over to our stabilizing arm here and replace it. So size 18 for the sway bar as well. Both bolts on each side here. Make sure those are very, very tight. Use as long of a ratchet as you have to make sure that you get plenty of torque on that. And make sure the tie rods look good. Nothing's bound up. So now we're going to go ahead and get our valance back. You'll see there's a plug still in here. So I'm just going to use a screwdriver, tap it out with a hammer, just straight back. And then that'll be in the frame or whatever. But you can buy these pretty easily online. You just have to find the right size, punch it back in. So I had to replace my pitman arm. You saw me attempt to get it off, which it kind of did, but everything was all chewed up and gross, and so I just abandoned the project and decided to buy a new one. Got this from AutoZone. You can also get these through Rock Auto. There's the details on part number and whatnot, crown. That's who I got it from. So I'll show you how to line this up, because either way, you're going to have to either buy a new one or take the old one off and replace it. So I will show you how to line it up properly. So when you're looking at your old kind of steering arm right here, if you just kind of push it up and put it in place where it was originally with the old one, you can kind of start to visualize where the arm is going to be. So it's not going to be straight back. It's not going to be, you know, in a straight line. It's going to be a little bit at a diagonal here. And so we're going to go ahead and undo this nut right here, take down that lock washer, and take off this protective plastic that's covering the gears right now. But we'll just sort of line it up in place and make sure that we can go ahead and get this on here. Mine is a little bit at an angle, and so you're pretty much going to mirror that same thing. And so we'll put our new one, which is going to be descending, so it's going to be laid like that. We'll put our new one on this end first, and then sort of start to line up the gearing, and then we'll push it up, put the nut, and then get this all tightened up. So again, knowing roughly where it's going to be, this sort of angle, you could see that there's larger teeth here, and then smaller, smaller, and then larger. And so when you flip around, you'll be able to see on the new gearing, it'll match that, right, with the larger gaps. So as long as you get the angle to where it's going from here to here, the teeth should already line up exactly where you need it. So let's go ahead and get that in place. So just like that, now we'll go ahead and get the nut and the lock washer on. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and start tightening this, and this will straighten that out. You're not going to go too far down. You just want to make sure that you can expose the hole for the cotter pin, which I'll show you in more detail here in a moment. And then you're also going to go ahead and tighten this bolt or this nut as well, and that will crush the lock washer, and then we'll be good to go, and we'll go back up top. Okay, so you can see through the castle nut the hole in the actual bolt. We're just going to take our cotter pin, go ahead and push that through, and then I'm going to use pliers to bend the far side of this and just bend it around the top. Now, if you remember back to the beginning of the video where I grabbed this and rotated it, and you can see my steering wheel rotating, right? But you can also now see the pitman arm moving, which means it's fixed. Yay! Okay, so let me show you how to, or which ones go where. The other thing, like I mentioned, you are technically supposed to flush out the system. They would also recommend that you replace the hoses but if you're like me, I'll show you how to just replace your old ones. There are a couple things that you need to replace on your old ones if you're going to still use them. Now, I have an issue back here where it's leaking, and I think it's partially because this clamp is far too long. So I'm going to remove this anyways, drop the hose, which is going to drain my reservoir here because I'm using all new fluids. But I'm also going to replace these gaskets on each of these. So I'll show you how to do that. Your new one will come with new gaskets. And then, like I said, I'll show you which ones go where. There we go. So I have the hose down here removed, and then don't forget to crack the cap so that way it flows nice and smoothly. And then make sure you have a catch can down there. So it's going to be an 8mm Allen wrench to remove these real quick. Just going to break them loose and they'll unthread by hand, just to make sure nothing falls in. So I'm going to use a tool like this, makes it a little bit easier, but you'll see the green gasket right here. Go ahead and try and get a grip on it. But it is going to be a little slippery, so let me see if I can come up at it. There we go. So I'm underneath it right now. Get it with a, there we go. Fell down, but that's all it is. And then you just take your new ones like this, and we'll pop it on there, and then we'll do the same thing to the other one. And then, like I said, I'm going to pour a little bit of power steering fluid down just to the top of the levels there, and then we'll go ahead and get these replaced. So this one goes in front, and then this one, which has the pressure line, hooks up to here. This goes to this one. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, now that's how it should look. So return line right here, down this way, pressure line right here in the back, so that's on there. Now you're just gonna simply fill it up, and when you run it, you'll go ahead and leave this off and then let it kind of settle in to all its place. Top it off, top it off, top it off. I do have a video on making adjustments to this right here. If you have to do it, it might be fine out of the box, but if you have to do it, go ahead and check that out. I'll link it at the end of this video. Essentially what that does is if your steering feels too light, like it's too easy to move the wheel, the steering wheel, and you want to kind of have more of a firm grip on it, then you can make an adjustment there. Or if you have the opposite issue, it's a little too tight and you want to make it a little bit more loose, a little easier to kind of spin the wheel, then go ahead and watch the video that I'll link. But other than that, like I said, we're just going to top it off, let it run. Keep an eye on it the first few times you drive. Check it right afterwards, just to make sure that you're at the correct level. You definitely don't want to dry it out your new unit, but feel free when you pop in, go ahead and turn the wheel left and right. Make sure you have full range of motion as you normally would, but other than that, you should be good to go. So thank you very much for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.